The old soldier only asked for a cup of water. Instead, he was told, "That'll be $1.99," as cameras quietly rolled and a nation watched, in disbelief. By sunrise, his quiet humiliation had turned into a digital wildfire. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The fallout didn't just happen, it detonated. By morning, Maple Brew's pristine Instagram page, once filled with artfully filtered lattes and polished wood interiors, had become a digital war zone. Thousands of furious comments flooded in by the minute. "Shame on you! Boycott Maple Brew! You don't deserve veterans' protection!" Each one more venomous than the last. Colby awoke to a phone buzzing so violently it fell off his nightstand. He tried to rationalize it. This is out of proportion. He'd followed store policy. It wasn't personal. It was principle. Rules made the business run. Without rules, there was chaos. But reason had no place in the storm of viral fury. Facts didn't matter. Optics did. And Colby, with his manicured beard and overpriced coffee, had become the villain of a national morality play. By noon, a crowd had begun gathering outside Maple Brew. Veterans with faded ball caps, young activists with hand-painted signs, mothers holding babies. The parking lot filled with American flags and righteous anger. One sign read, "Water should be free for those who bled." Inside, Colby stood frozen behind the counter, watching through the glass as a man in a wheelchair saluted Mark Dalton's image on a blown-up printout. The image showed Mark mid-step, holding the paper cup like a soldier carries a memory. Colby's baristas didn't show up. His morning shift walked out before their first order. The register beeped in vain. No one came inside. No orders. No noise. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional sharp honk from outside. A local reporter knocked gently on the door. Colby didn't answer. He turned away, tried to focus on wiping down the counter that was already spotless. His hands trembled. The tap where Mark had drawn his water now felt radioactive. Every surface in the cafe seemed contaminated, not by dirt, but by perception. At 3:14 p.m., a letter arrived by courier. Legal stationery. A brief, formal notice. His coffee supplier was terminating their partnership, citing misalignment with our community standards. Then came an email from a payments processor. His account was frozen pending an ethics review. It was as if the entire infrastructure of his business was collapsing under moral scrutiny. Colby's phone rang again. Unknown number. He declined. It rang again. Again. Then a message popped up. "Hi, this is Claire with CNN. We'd like to interview you tonight. Live." He stared at it. Just stared. Across town, Mark Dalton sat in a modest living room with faded curtains and a dog curled at his feet. He hadn't asked for any of this. The video? He hadn't even noticed it was being recorded. He'd just wanted a cup of water, but now his voicemail overflowed with messages. From media, from charities, from strangers. A GoFundMe in his name had raised over $60,000 in less than 24 hours. People called him a hero, a symbol, a martyr of modern neglect. He didn't feel like a hero, just tired. "I didn't want this," he muttered, rubbing his knee where an old injury pulsed with ghostly pain. The dog whined, sensing his unease. Mark reached down and scratched its ear. "All I wanted was water." But outside his house, the world had already decided. This was no longer about hydration. It was about respect, about honor, about who we value, and who we forget. By 10:00 a.m., the temperature outside had already hit 96 degrees, but the real heat was inside Maple Brew, radiating off Colby Monroe in waves. He stood in the center of his once stylish cafe, now stripped of its serene ambiance, the scent of roasted beans replaced by acrid panic. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, the silence thick, broken only by the sporadic clicks of his shoes against the tile floor as he paced like a caged animal. The sinks were dry, the espresso machine, a $20,000 pride piece imported from Florence, sat inert and mocking. No water meant no steam, no coffee, no business. The filtered self-serve tap, once a small profit booster, had become a symbol of hypocrisy. Its polished spout gleamed under the recessed lighting, accusing. Colby slammed the register shut. His hand lingered on the countertop, gripping the edge hard enough for his knuckles to pale. He turned to check the notifications flooding his phone. Yelp had suspended Maple Brew's listing due to extraordinary public interest. Google reviews dropped the shop's rating from 4.8 stars to 1.6 in less than 12 hours. DoorDash and Uber Eats had both emailed statements terminating their service agreements, effective immediately, in alignment with community values. The backlash wasn't just viral, it was systemic. And then came the real blow. A fresh headline flashed across his phone screen in bold red type. Exclusive, Maple Brew accused of illegally tapping city water. It was from the Arizona Republic, and it left nothing to interpretation. The story laid out everything: how Colby had installed a gray market purification system to cut costs, bypassing official city permits, how he'd publicly joked about it during a podcast titled Caffeinated Capitalism, saying, "Why pay the city a premium for water that's practically free anyway?" That flippant soundbite had been clipped, subtitled, and reposted 100,000 times in a single hour. It ran alongside footage of Mark Dalton being charged for water. Colby read the article twice, then a third time, each word flaying him open. The name at the center of the leak, Lieutenant Maya Brooks, jumped out like a gunshot. Her LinkedIn profile surfaced almost instantly. Army reservist, structural engineer, local hero, and in a stroke of poetic symmetry, a former customer of Maple Brew. There was even a tagged Instagram photo of her from 2 years ago, sipping a cappuccino in front of the same counter she had just helped shut down. Colby's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just cancellation. It was justice by scalpel, precise, targeted, and unforgiving. Outside, the crowd had grown. A few media vans now lined the curb. Protesters weren't chanting anymore. They were just watching, with a kind of grim, expectant silence. A woman stood holding a laminated photo of her brother, a Marine lost in Kandahar, while a boy beside her handed out miniature American flags. It felt less like a protest and more like a memorial. Inside, the air grew thick with humidity from the failing AC. Colby loosened his collar, throat dry, mouth chalky. He reached instinctively for the tap, twisted the handle. Nothing. Just silence. He stared at the spout, his silent accomplice, now turned traitor. And for the first time, Colby Monroe understood something he'd never learned in business school. Water doesn't just quench thirst. It reveals character. And his, the world had judged, was parched. Colby Monroe sat alone in the hollow shell of what used to be his dream. The lights were off. The polished floors had dulled, streaked with dust and scuff marks from weeks of silence. The chairs, once meticulously arranged, were stacked against the wall like forgotten ambitions. The espresso machine, his prized gleaming monument to success, was covered with a tarp, its once familiar hum replaced by the creaks and groans of a building left in limbo. On the counter, his phone buzzed with another notification. "Your business listing has been removed for inactivity." Colby didn't bother opening it. He had memorized the rhythm of his downfall. The morning he'd gone viral for the wrong reason, the afternoon his water was cut off, the evening his brand became a punchline. He had tried to fix it. The apology video had been shot carefully, framed with soft, natural light, the skyline in the background, a clean shave, and a gray blazer over his usual rolled sleeves. His tone had been humble, his words rehearsed, but sincerity can't be staged, and the world knows when you're reading lines off a teleprompter hidden in your heart. The comments had been swift and merciless. Too late. Now you realize vets are human? You're sorry because you got caught. And worse than the hate were the remixes. Dozens of TikToks, thousands of reels, his awkward apology dubbed over with laugh tracks, laid atop slow-motion footage of Mark Dalton placing 2 crumpled bills on the counter. Someone even deepfaked Colby crying into a cup labeled Filtered Privilege, $1.99. He became an icon, not of capitalism, but of callousness. Across town, something else had taken root. The Hydrate Our Heroes initiative swept through Phoenix like a heatwave of conscience. Businesses big and small, diners, barbershops, tattoo parlors, volunteered to install water stations. Each station came with a brushed metal plaque engraved with the same promise: for every mark, for every vet. Donations surged beyond expectations. What began as a local effort spilled into state news, then national. Other cities called asking how to join. The first station had been installed with poetic precision, right in front of Maple Brew. It stood there, solid and humming quietly, offering clean, ice-cold water to anyone who passed by. Maintenance workers, teachers, teenagers, homeless vets, the ones who, like Mark, had once been invisible. Now, their thirst was met not with suspicion, but with honor. Colby had watched from inside as Mark returned. He hadn't expected him to come back. The old man didn't linger. He simply filled a cup, nodded once at the machine, and turned to walk away. No bitterness, no speech, just a small act of reclamation. Colby had watched through the window, hidden behind the reflection of his own empty tables, feeling something too complex to name. Guilt, perhaps, or the echo of what dignity really meant. And then there was the mural. Bright and bold, it had appeared on the brick wall overnight. Soldiers of all races and generations marched shoulder to shoulder across its surface, their uniforms blending into clouds, mountains, sand. But in the lower corner, almost hidden unless you were looking, was Mark's face, not young, not heroic in the Hollywood sense, just proud, steady, human. Beside him, painted in sharp black strokes, the words, "Some debts can never be repaid, but respect is a good start." Colby visited it once, only once. He stood beneath that mural and stared until his eyes burned. He didn't take a photo, didn't post a story. He just stood there, listening to the soft trickle of water behind him as another passerby filled their cup, and realized the final truth of it all. He hadn't just lost a business, he'd missed a moment to be decent, and some moments don't come twice.